Good morning. So the movie that I chose for my project was the extremely wicked, shocking, evil, and vile movie about Ted Bundy and his battle through the court systems after his killings. It was um it was created by Joe Berlinger and it is currently a movie on Netflix. A short summary of the film: Ted Bundy ends up meeting and begins going out with Elizabeth Kendall in the beginning of the movie. A year later, Ted is arrested under suspicion of kidnapping a woman. During this year, he gets really close with Elizabeth. She also gets really close with them, and they begin to start looking like they're going to be forming a family. The woman was able to pick Bundy out of a lineup and was charged, and he ended up getting charged with aggravated kidnapping and is going to be serving 15 years. However, it does not stop here. More cases involving Bundy begin to rise as these police precincts begin making connections. Throughout the film, Elizabeth has trouble deciding whether to trust Bundy or not. She resorts to alcohol and really begins to harm herself um, while trying to help Bundy, of course. As more cases arise, Bundy sees his window to freedom closing, and he attempts to escape twice. Both were successful, but not for long. An old friend of Bundy's, Carol Boone, ended up moving to Florida in an attempt to assist Bundy throughout his legal battles as the verdict of putting him to death seemed almost imminent. Um, Undisputable evidence was presented in the court that even Bundy's charm and cleverness could not outmatch. They ended up taking prints of his teeth that they found on one of the female victims' bodies, and they were able to match a tooth that he had chipped with those pictures. Bundy would be sentenced to death by electrocution 10 years later. He was still on death row because it does take a while for that process to go through. Elizabeth frequently visited Bundy, but she visited Bundy for a final time and she asked the truth from him, and he ends up giving it to her and admits that he was this horrible person that everybody has told her. She once again has trouble dealing with this, but she does feel a sense of relief after finding this out. And after Bundy finally admits to his killings, he is killed short after. Looking at the little bit of history behind it, Bundy confessed to 36 killings of the young women across several states, but experts actually believe that total to probably be more closer to 100 or even more. He often lured his victims into his car by pretending to be injured and asking for their help. Their kindness proved to be a fatal mistake. Bundy was very charismatic, and a lot of people liked his personality, so they never thought anything of it. This was why he was able to kill so many people in such little time, because he was practically plucking them off the street. Bundy was finally arrested for the first time on August 16, 1975 in Utah after fleeing from a patrol car. We don't see this fleeing of the patrol car in the movie, but a search went of the vehicle, and they found masks, handcuffs, rope, and other items that were obviously going to be used for malintent. Little bit of history continued. This was the car that Bundy used. He actually took out the passenger seat to make more room for the woman that he would end up kidnapping, so then people could not see them while he was driving. The picture on the right was Bundy in the courtroom, and the women behind him are the women that were also being heard and seen, hooting and hollering after Bundy makes good points or valid points in arguments. They would be going on the record telling the cameramen that they don't think that Bundy would have done this, they don't believe Bundy could have done this, but it was obvious that the majority of their thoughts and things surrounding Bundy were influenced by their likeliness of him and a flirtatious nature, to say. Looking at more of the historical, moving on to historical accuracy. It's a fictional film, but it is based off of true events, and there's plenty of true events to call this a valid and historically accurate movie. The title itself is a reference to the remarks made by Judge Edward Coare. He actually called Bundy's murders extremely wicked and shockingly evil and vile in the courtroom. So this is something that was definitely a parallel. Though it's not shown in the movie, Bundy did spend a lot of time, 4 months roughly, losing 35 pounds in order to fit into the ceiling to escape. This was not scene in the movie. However, it wasn't even mentioned. Little details like this were very frequent in the movie, but they weren't important enough to take away from any of the historical value. Another example of this was seen with Elizabeth, Ted Bundy's girlfriend, who ends up seeing a work colleague named Jerry. In real life, however, this Jerry person did not exist. He was just placed into the movie to add a little bit of emotional relief for the struggling Elizabeth character. The camera crew did a very good job in the prison scenes by showing how accurate it was. In prison, Ted Bundy was very out of touch with reality. He wasn't comfortable at all, and he was always anxious and looking for a way out. The film often used real footage as well of courtroom and prison scenes, and that just also added another aspect of realism. Overall, Zac Efron was the perfect casting for the Ted Bundy part. The main aspect of Ted Bundy's character was his likeliness. Oftentimes, nobody thought Ted could have committed any of these crimes because of how innocent and handsome he looked. Efron, of course, matches this description almost perfectly. He has frequently flashes flirtatious smiles, remarks, or general conversation that young women eat up in the movie. Once locked away in prison, however, it is a night and day personality change. He begins to be much more anxious. He looks a lot more dangerous, and he is not the same person that everybody sees on the outside. You see also great acting in the courtroom sentencing scene, as well as great cinematography. Efron does a really good job in this scene expressing his emotion. He ends up giving his final statement after he receives his verdict, and he, of course, says that he's not guilty. And he looks really convincing from the outside, and the camera is on him the entire time. But as the camera pans in, we begin to see that his face is quivering. He is tearing up, and he is obviously in distress and nervous about being put to death. And I think that the cameras alone do really good in that scene, but Zac Efron also does a really good job in that scene, portraying that same emotional aspect. We can look at a couple of professional reviews, and they also believe that this movie is valid. Critics agree that Zac Efron's role and his ability to play Ted Bundy was very important in this. If it wasn't for Zac Efron embodying every inch of Ted Bundy's charismatic persona with a stunningly mesmerizing performance, we'd be left with a forgettable affair. Zac Efron is, of course, what made this movie great and memorable. He was able to get under the skins of viewers and present a real case as to why you may be innocent. If you were to watch this movie, you like I, may have begun to think that Ted Bundy might actually be innocent by how actually convincing he is. Here's a couple of rewards that the movie received. It is a fairly recent movie, so it has not gone through the test times of history yet, but I believe that it is a very good movie. My personal review of it, I thought it was very informing. I liked the courtroom scenes a lot. I liked being able to hear the different things that went into convicting him. And the thing that just surprised me the most with it is how many potential victims he could have had. We know for sure of around 30, but there were so many more potential victims that he could have actually killed. But overall, I really enjoyed this movie, and I hope that you enjoyed this presentation as well.